nathi khulunywa kwakunkulu ukuthi i-timekeeping iyahlupha unkosikazi wami lo laphana, so I'm very happy that he's here lockdown. Oh, by the way, in case people didn't realize, this gentleman is Dr. Skabati, is Skabati as well. I'm forward to know more guys. And I'm very fascinated to know that actually what Dr. Musen did here actually rigged this election. So he put the entire family here, which is very cool. So we are sorry. No, we do not call it nepotism in this part of the world. We call it networking. Let me begin by just making a few points of clarification, which then will allow me to sort of talk about some of the things that I had thought of. I had thought of raising some very radical positions, but I'm going to turn them down. To begin with, I just want to make one clarification. Zimbabwe is not a nation. Zimbabwe is a state, in case people did not know that. Zimbabwe is a state, but it is a state. Within that state exists different nations. Ndebele is a nation, Shona is a nation. And by right, if the equation was to function properly in a with proper political maturity, Zimbabwe would have managed to graduate into something that we call a nation state. Britain is a very good example of a nation state. In fact, United Kingdom is a very good example of a nation state, with the different tribes, if you like, the British, the English, the Welsh, the Scottish, the Irish, living side by side, and actually enjoying their peoplehood and contiguity, and also the essence of their identities and their history and their cultures. But unfortunately, in a case like Zimbabwe, where we have had to experience serious dehumanization, particularly in the form of kukurahundi, which was physical violence, which is what I'm going to talk about, naturally we have lost the ability and the potential to become a nation state. So we remain actually existing as a state, not as a nation. And it's very interesting because most of you here, if I was to ask you, where are you from? Often, if you want to see it with the people from Matabeleland, one of the things that they do is that they will be at the well, they're good at actually saying, I'm Zimbabwean. That's what they will say, I'm Zimbabwean. But then their being Zimbabwean, or their Zimbabweanness, will only end at the point of his tupa. Beyond the identity, the ID rather, the ID card, the person of it ceases to be Zimbabwean because there is nothing that then defines them as Zimbabweans. Immediately, they then fall into the different categories of the nations that they belong to, which is very interesting because social identities and cultural identities in Africa are very thick than actually identities that we should be having and enjoying with our states. Now, that said, allow me to then ask a few, or maybe to begin by also offering a few definitions. In fact, by the way, I had said when Dr. Mguni asked me to come and give a talk, I tried to toy with a lot of ideas. I'm a scholar in cultural studies and I'm a sociologist by training. So I was wondering what exactly is it that I'm going to talk about. Then around 2 a.m. this morning, an idea just crossed my mind. I said, okay, my talk is going to be about what I would refer to as of marginality, space, and the politics of difference. In a sense, I'm looking at beginning with culture as first and ending with identity as reality. But let me first define what culture is. In my view, I'm taking this from some of my writings, so you will pardon me. Culture basically entails the actual grounded terrain of the practices and representations, and language is at the center of it, and also customs of many specific societies. For example, here, what we are doing here, we're trying to revive Ubuntu. That is part of what we mean. But of course, culture also is concerned with questions of shared social meaning. We must share it. Culture is actually learned. We learn it, it has two variables. We learn it, we share it. So it actually has shared social meanings and also the various ways we make sense of the world. And one of the ways that we make sense of the world is our being diasporic here. All of us, that what has brought us here today is actually the fact that we are diasporic. we are actually existing outside the space that we claim is our home. And also, another issue that's very important is that it's language that actually embalms culture. It's language that becomes a conduit to culture. Now, language gives us meaning. It helps us to define our social practices and to live within them and to understand ourselves. It helps us to define who we are. It is through language that we're able to define also what I refer to as the structures of feeling. Kukurahundi is one very good example of how, when we were dehumanized, we found a way of actually presenting our story through language. And we have been able to take our story from that particular level to a way of defining ourselves. Everyone now here from Matabeleland would actually identify with the narrative of Kukurahundi, some way, one way or the other. So, culture actually, in many ways, is part of this expressive totality of social relations through our expressions as part of what I have already referred to as the structures of feeling. Now, the structure of feeling